I am Lisa Valeria, the founder and president of the Phoenicia Foundation. And on behalf of myself and the board, I would just like to thank all of you for listening to this webinar that is part 5 of a 6-week series of the important role of nonverbal communication. The webinar is presented by 2 amazing and passionate speech pathologists, Luna DeCurtis and Dawn Ferreira. Part 5, they are going to cover AAC and nonverbal communication for social purposes. This series is brought to us by 2 of our amazing sponsors, Silicon Valley Bank Foundation and the Lewis Greenwood Foundation. Phoenicia Foundation is also honored by their support and all of our volunteers and donors who help us achieve our mission of helping those with special needs, their families, and their community thrive. If you're interested in learning more about Phoenicia Foundation, I ask you to visit our website at www.phoeniciafoundation.org. And I am now going to play the live webinar that was recorded by Luna and Dawn. So I'm going to now share my screen with all of you.
Hello and welcome to part 5 in our series about nonverbal communication. Today we're talking about nonverbal communication for social purposes, and more specifically, how you can support those using nonverbal communication socially, and also your own ability to use nonverbal communication. So, we identified what nonverbal communication is, and that there are some people who are primarily nonverbal communicators. We also talked about how it changes over the lifespan and how we as therapists use it for those individuals that have breakdowns in nonverbal communication and comprehension, receptive language, and expressive language. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what happens when we encounter an individual who is a primary nonverbal communicator and uses perhaps an alternative augmentative communication device, anything from high to low tech. They might be using sign language or a dedicated talker. How can we support them socially when we do encounter those individuals, right? So, for example, if someone is using an AAC device out in the community, some of the things that we can do to help support them socially in that attempt to communicate is 1, be patient, wait for them to formulate the message. 2, make sure that you're facing them so that they can see your responses. 3, know that sometimes the message can be delivered and then their nonverbal communication may be absent or delayed. So we sort of have to infer what the meaning is in addition to the words that we hear. So, this applies to all different individuals. I had a client that I saw from the age of 4 to the age of 30 who was born with Down syndrome. And while she worked very hard in therapy, just because of the configuration of her articulators and structure, physical, anatomical structure, that, her articulation was still very difficult to understand for some individuals. So she and I, when she got older, would go out to the community. And my approach was that I supported her in supporting others in understanding her better. So if she was ordering at a restaurant, I made sure that she waited until the person she was communicating with actually made eye contact with her so that they could see her lips and see what she was doing, and to really support the articulation that was sometimes very difficult to understand. I also taught her to use more gestures, more nonverbal communication, to emphasize with her gestures and facial expressions to help convey the meaning a little bit more. I also reminded her that some individuals might have difficulty, even though she's using those nonverbal gestures, understanding her. So that it might be very common for someone to say, "Excuse me, could you repeat that?" Or less politely, huh? What did you say? To let her know that she would have to repeat what she was saying, but to remember to use that nonverbal information by pointing at the object that she wanted, by looking at them and making an accompanying facial expression. And this really seemed to be very effective for her. Now, if you're on the receiving end of her communication, the ways that you could have helped would be to be patient, look at her directly, listen to what she said, and then request that she repeat the part of the information that you didn't understand. You would also use your gestures to confirm, oh, is this the one that you wanted, right? I also had her point to items on the menu, and you then, as the receiver of that communication, could point and say, this one, is this the one that you're asking for? So these are very effective things that you could do for someone, for example, that has a very difficult time with their articulation. Now, Luna, how would that translate into working with ASB populations?
When working with kids with social communication disorders, I can describe what I do both in the sessions and in the community as well. So during the sessions, I'm really trying to get the child's attention, maybe making a noise, something like that, that just gets their attention to my face. I might highlight my face with my hands or even with a toy. I might put what it is that I want them to see up by my face so that they can make the connection with what I'm talking about and my facial expressions around it. I certainly change positions, like Dawn said, to make sure that sometimes if I just get closer and don't say anything, can they feel that proximity change and maybe know what to do with it? If I need to show them something like a book, I make sure they're standing on the opposite side of me so that I can show them the book, but then I can also take the book down and have them look at my face. I could show them the book and show them my reactions as I'm looking at the book, but then also be able to take the book away easily. Then, if I just want to get their attention, I do not want to use the phrase, look at me, because it's not as effective. But if I have something for them to see after I make a noise, something silly that we could then talk about after, hey, then that's a bridge to my message that will come next. I also like to play imitation games where the child with autism is both imitating me, but I am imitating the child as well. So this can be just literally imitating the child's behavior as he or she is in front of me. Or I have a box of toys with pairs, so we can both pick out the same toy, and whatever the child does with it, I imitate, and vice versa. I go to do something with the toy and see if that child will imitate it as well. Mirroring is some of the basic foundation of social skills for children with social communication. And how I take it out into the community is either at the park, which is a more unstructured place, or at the store, restaurant, which is more structured. I tend to show them pictures of the place beforehand and what to expect when they're there, or maybe even a video of what to expect when you're at a park or you're at a restaurant. I then have them tune into others and observe others in a store, others who are bringing an item up to the counter, who are giving the money, who are receiving the money and taking the bag. And if I need to support them, I usually will stand behind them as a way to help them gesture, rather than the person, the waiter, or the clerk looking at me to interpret. I want to be able to be behind and support the child in, again, maybe giving or receiving. And if we're at the park, I might just have them tune into the noises that they hear. Do we hear somebody laughing? Should we go see? Do we hear somebody crying? Maybe we can give them something, a tissue, a Band-Aid. Sometimes we just play simple follow the leader games. A simple game of chase or tag or hide and seek can provide ways to just get it back and forth in a very social way without having the language interfere with it.
Yeah, you know, Luna, there are another group of individuals that might use sign language or lip reading as a primary form of expression. Of course, individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. And the way that we can help those individuals in a social situation is, for example, making sure that we're facing them, just like an individual using an AAC device, that we're facing them because they might be lip readers. They want to see your face, they want to see the movement of your lips. They might be using a combination of signs and verbal language, and we do our best to out those words and make meaning of them, right? Understand them. Now, you don't have to be proficient in any kind of sign language. We all know how to use gestures and nonverbal communication, as we discussed earlier. So do your best attempt to communicate in that way. And then, because most of us have phones, you can also, if you're trying to communicate something, you can pull up an image on your phone, a picture. If you have paper and pencil, this is a low-tech form of an augmentative communication. And you can write down the words. You can use text to talking. So an individual who reads but is not verbal can see your message. So you look at the tools you have in your nonverbal communication toolbox and really allow yourself to support that individual by using one of those tools, even though you might feel awkward. It's very important to make an attempt, even though, as I said, we might not feel comfortable or familiar or proficient with it, but we all, again, going back to using nonverbal communication early on when we were infants, we all have experience using nonverbal communication. Maybe we don't all have experience communicating with those who are primarily nonverbal communicators, but we can. Thank you so much for joining us today about nonverbal communication for social purposes and how you can support those who are nonverbal communicators. Join us next time for the last part in our series on nonverbal communication, where we will talk about executive functioning and inferencing. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks everyone for joining, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.